A beautiful day to you out there, wherever you're watching M4S Studios from, Lagos, outside of Nigeria, wherever. I hope you're having a very exciting and a pleasant day. Like I say, we bring the masterminds of the global players of the industry all the time here in the studio to talk and enrich your worldview on some of the issues we are looking at. And of course, today I have another very huge personality, Senior High Chief Tony Akiotu, former Group Managing Director of AIT, current Vice Chairman of Broadcast Organization of Nigeria, fellow Nigerian Guilds of Editor, fellow Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, and current Chairman, M4S Studios Television.
My pleasure, Felix. How are you doing?
Very well. Good to see you. You've acted behind the scenes for a very, very long time.
The last time I was on a live television set, I can't remember. But,
it's quite interesting. Good to have you around.
My pleasure.
And for a lot of people who didn't know, he started from sports, went into proper broadcasting, and of course sat down at the hems of the board rooms in the big offices around. So tell us, how has it been? How has broadcasting?
Well, we give glory to God. My life has been all about broadcasting. Broadcasting has been all about my life. Looking back, it's about close to 50 years, about 48 years of my life has been dedicated to broadcasting. Started from radio, if you recall, Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria. Then how old was I then? I was about a young man, about 19. I just left school. Okay. And then, I think in those days, 1978 it was, the news agency of Nigeria just started, and they were recruiting. And NTA and FRCN, as it then was, were unfortunate to lose some good hands
okay.
to the news agency of Nigeria, which was in its infancy. So they were recruiting seasoned and tested journalists and broadcasters to work in their office in Igomu.
Okay, interesting.
And then I just left school, and I was asked to come for an interview.
Yeah.
Barely just a few days after I left school, Mr. Biola Lasokbe.
Okay.
I then done, I had 2 certificates in one at the age of 19.
Okay.
One at presumably some flying colors from my school certificate. I just finished a course, a diploma in journalism online from the UK. And I went for an interview in the office of Mr. Biola Lasokbe, the then director of news, who passed on about 2 years ago. And he said, young man, I'm impressed with your CV. Would you want to work for a while before going for further studies? And I said, why not?
Yeah.
And that started my career. Radio Nigeria was good to me. Right from my years in, I worked for about 16, 17 years in Radio Nigeria, but in between, they sponsored me to the University of Lagos, where I went for further studies. And thereafter, deregulation of private broadcasting, which was around 1992.
Okay.
You were one of the beneficiaries with Minaj. Chief Raymond Dopesi, who fortunately got the first license to run Ray Power, approached me and said, gentlemen, you happen to come from the same part of the country with me, and you are the only person I can recall in the media, that your name was ringing a bell on Radio Nigeria. Would you want to work and help me set up the news department of Ray Power, as it then was, in Alagbado? And I said, why not? And then we started our journey together with him, Chief Dopesi of blessed memory. And it was a resounding success at DSC those days. And I think it was the success we made of Ray Power that encouraged General Sani Abacha, the then military leader, to say, hey, Chief Dopesi, people speak so well about your radio station in Lagos. Why don't you also want to go into television? And then that idea came. But interestingly, the name AIT that we chose was a suggestion of Sani Abacha to Chief Dopesi.
Interesting.
To say, I think Nigeria is big country, Chief Dokwesi. You should call the station African Independent Television. So he suggested the name to Chief Dokwesi, and today it became a household name. Yeah, and as they say, the rest is history.
Well, that was a very long journey, and I think you've done what. But let's look at the broadcast industry from Abacha's and deregulation and what have you. Have we really grown? Of course, Nigeria probably had the first radio station among most African, including South Africa.
Absolutely.
But what have we made of it?
Well, I think we have grown. Thanks to democracy. I mean, we operate in a constitutional democracy today. And I believe that Nigerian media, between then and now, has evolved. Today, if you ask me, off the cuff, I can't count the number of radio stations that have been licensed by the NBC. So there is plurality of opinion, whether it is at the national level, at the state level, or at the local level. There are hundreds of radio stations. Same with television. So what that means is that whether you are a state governor, you can have access to not just the state radio or television station, you can have access to as many stations as there are, or licensed by the NBC within your domain. So I think that the media has done well. And in terms of holding the elected people accountable, which is what Section 22 of the Constitution empowers us, I will score the media well. I'll probably say 8 over 10. Okay. That the media has actually
done what they should.
Done well in upholding elected government officials accountable to the people in line with Section 22 of the Constitution, and Section 39 of the same Constitution says guarantees freedom of expression and freedom of the press. So along these lines, I think we've not done badly.
All right. When you look at proliferation, there's so many media houses. And then you look at the advert spin, total sponsorships, and media sale in the industry. It's probably less than 100 billion naira. How will these media houses survive?
Well, I believe you have touched on a very sore point. If you take a cursory look at the industry today, less than 20%, and I'm being very honest, of media houses are doing well. If doing well means paying salary as at when due, because that's the whole idea. You don't engage people and you don't pay them well and pay them as before the 25th
of the month.
And I believe it's because the media is a reflection of society.
Of the larger society.
Yeah, of the larger society. So if the economy is taking a plunge, the media suffers. In fact, the media feels it much more than any other person. And I think that has happened. But things are beginning to pick up gradually with the new government, the deregulation of the floating of the naira, and of course the deregulation of the downstream sector. Even though cost of living is high, at the end of the day, what you earn, the argument those days, look, how much can your pay slip take you home?
Can it take you home?
And how much can you actually pay the bills? But I believe that things will get better. But the media has not done very well along this line. And is an area that we believe that will improve with time.
All right. Over the years, we've talked about digitization of the industry, so all kinds of... but Nigeria hasn't done that yet. They said it's probably going to be a great opportunity for the industry. Spectrums will be available and what have you. What is really delaying it?
Well, with due respect to the NBC and those in the helm of affairs, I think the NBC, somewhere along the line, decided to bite more than it could chew. I think so. Because some of the licenses that were issued for signal distributors, for those set-top boxes. And the NBC should have just opened the space. Okay. They didn't have to license everybody in the ecosystem. You don't have to license everybody in the ecosystem. You have just allowed, and that's why they have some court cases today. Okay. Those who were licensed for the set-top boxes, because some of them went to take bank loans. Yeah. And they say, look, you can't tell us that you want to use set-top boxes and suddenly you want to jettison the set-top boxes, and then do something else. It can't work, that they have invested and they were licensed. So I believe that, but I do also believe we can still get it right. But we must carry everybody along. You can't ask me, or you can't license me as a set-top distributor, and I'm going to borrow money at high interest rates in the banks, and then you suddenly want to jettison that idea, believing that some other model will work. Yeah. So the court cases and the fact that some people believe that there are interplay of politics and some other interests in the digitization process. Yeah. So that also has affected what should have seen us make giant strides and also catch up with some of the nations in the world. I feel ashamed. I feel embarrassed that Nigeria at this stage has not even gone 50% in the process of digital migration. Yeah. It is quite painful. And given the role some people like the late Eddie Amana have played, because there was a time that we followed the white paper considerably, and then we probably would have just gotten this process through. Yeah. But then this lack of continuity in terms of policy. Today you have one person at the helm of affairs in the embassy. Before you know it, in a year or two, is removed. Another person comes on board and starts a whole new process. So this is where we are today.
Yeah, because if you look at it, there's a lot of research that say we have about 27 million TV households. And if you look at it, look at the eyeballs, and if we can actually achieve it, if we can deliver it, that's enough eyeballs to keep good money on the table.
An amazing number. An amazing number.
And why don't we use it in delivering the numbers? Because our problem is if you have a great show on TV, you don't really have data. And it's a huge problem.
Well, I know the former...
How do we integrate data?
Yeah, I know the former minister set up, engage a company for measurement, audience measurement. Because, and that is something that's also very key. I mean, you must have audience measurement to know who is watching what station and what program at a particular time. But that also helps advertising.
Definitely.
If you have a program that is running at 7 p.m. peak time, you should be able to know on what channel.
And it's delivering the numbers.
And it's delivering the numbers. So, I mean, if I want to advertise, and maybe I want to advertise a product for women, I should be able to know, oh, this is the station to go to. Yeah. I have the eyeballs and I have the numbers. A product for children, this is the place to be. But the good thing with digitization is that it will also create room for specialization. Okay. We are going to have stations that will cater for the diverse interests, whether it's women, whether it's children, whether it's politics, whatever. Yeah. So, and I think the earlier we get it on and get it right.
Yes, because if you look
there'll be a lot of opportunities, even for employment.
For employment, there will be a lot of opportunity. Because really, when we say content is king, it's about what kind of content you're putting on television.
And at what time.
And at what time. So there has to be a whole wide of strategy around this. Yeah. For new broadcasters coming on board, you've been there and one of the big players in the private sector. Do you think it's gloomy, or do you think there's a great opportunity?
No.
You're just new. M4S is new.
Yes. The opportunity now, when we started, I mean, how much were we paying a salary those days? The earliest salary I got was a little over 100 naira. Then, 100 naira then, you can imagine what it was. Okay. But today, you want to engage we've had a series of interviews for young people who have heard about M4 television, M4S television, and I say, oh, we love this. We love new challenges, opportunities, but what is driving them is not the passion. What is driving them is not the fact that they want to, as it were, identify with something that is new, something that is novel, something that's unique, that they can grow with it. It is, how much is on the table? Okay. How much am I going to be paid? But when we started, it was money. Yeah, I mean, we all need money to live the good life, to pay the bills. But it wasn't the only thing. It wasn't the only motivating factor. There were the other things that were pushing us, that inspired us. And one of them was the fact that the passion.
You're doing something that makes you happy. It's
something
not
that
just
makes you happy. You know, I can tell you in the early days of Ray Power, in Alagbado, a very rural community. It was when Chief Dokpesi invited some of us over that we ever heard of the name Alagbado. I never heard about it in Lagos, you know, because I worked in Ikoyi. I was transiting between Ikoyi and Victoria Island down NT or Radio Nigeria. But look, 24 hours we were at work, you know. Even when you had closed, you wanted to be part of the next shift. You wanted to know what was going on in the studio. The excitement, it was...
But I think it's a global problem for the Gen Zs. The younger people struggle to keep a job. So it's not peculiar to this industry or to Nigeria. And a lot of research has been going out. How do we hold on the Gen Zs? What really motivates the Gen Zs? A school of thought says, because their fathers are comfortable. They can actually go, I'm tired, go home and stay. Because they've gotten to that level, the father will keep providing food and all that. But really, how do we fix it? Because it's a problem in the workforce.
It is a problem. I'll tell you, I mean, one of my sons, he was working in the banking sector. And someday he said to me, look, Daddy, this marketing thing, I'm not just at home with it. I'm not at home with it. And I said, young man, don't worry, to get better. You know, it's a new thing. You have to adapt to it. You have to get yourself used to it. And so after about 3-4 years or something, one day I just asked him, I said, I called him, I said, I guess you're at work. He said, no, I'm home. I said, what are you doing at home? He said, so I've started to throw in the letter.
Wow.
I've said, look, I've had enough. I can't do it again, you know? So their mindset is different from the way our mindset works. Those days, even if you had challenges at work, you know, you all believe that you could ruffle,
navigate
the rough weather, and regardless of what was wrong, your parents will always tell you things will get better, you know? But I think the way is the way the world is moving. It's the way the world is moving, and the opportunities are there for them now. Is boundless. It's like the seas. It's as boundless as the sea. And but then they have to be focused. We were focused, and that's why we're able to build a career. And then I believe that the problem with most of them these days is that they have broken focus. They want to do so many things at the same time, and there's nothing wrong in multitasking and exhibiting and displaying talent in its various forms and ramifications. But then you have to also prove yourself as an exceptional talent in a given area.
Interesting. I'll take you to a very interesting area, which is the Freedom of Information Act. A lot of people have talked about it, great thing and all that, but I saw a very interesting one where somebody actually asked for an information and it was asked to pay 1.5 billion for the printouts.
Yes, I actually discussed that with a friend of mine, a senior advocate of Nigeria, and I said, this for me is disturbing. I know the Freedom of Information Act, when it came to being in 2011, our expectation was that some journalists were going to test it by way of access or right to information. And that did happen. I know a couple of journalists who did. But somewhere along the line, some government institutions begin, they thought
reluctant.
they were, not just reluctant,
Okay.
they thought they were smart.
Smart, okay.
And you write, and they take you through the officialdom or bureaucracy within system.
Okay.
You know, either your letter goes through the office of the director general or a permanent secretary. They tell you it's been minuted to the one director, and you get another director is receiving. This example that you cited is one of the tests to see how functional or how government institutions make the Freedom of Information Act work. But at the end of the day, after you went through the mill within that system, within the INEC, the request of over 1 billion naira,
1.5 billion naira,
that the gentleman was asked to pay was, for some of us, was ridiculous. But what my friend said, the lawyer, was that, well, the Act provides that the person who is seeking the information, if it's in printed copy, has to pick the bill.
Okay.
Yeah, and that probably explains why INEC is asking for that, what some of us consider as ridiculous amount of money. Man, I said, look, information has been sent online to the gentleman.
Simple,
Send it online to him.
Let him now decide how he wants to do it.
Let him determine how he wants to do it.
Yeah.
If he's going to have it printed,
or digital,
or he's going to work on it digitally.
Yeah.
So that option should be left to him, but not for INEC to write
that I have to print
and then they have to absolutely, and pay about 1.5 billion naira
for the printing.
So I think that we'll get it right. The freedom of information has come to stay. So no government appointee can deny me and you access to information that we need during the course of our duties, because we're also protected by some sections of the Constitution that I cited earlier, Section 22 and Section 39. These are sections that expressly give the press access or rights and access to information.
Interesting. Well, let's come back to an area that you are the vice chairman. I mean, I can't talk to you without asking you about Broadcast Organization of Nigeria. Has it really lived up to its billing? Has it delivered to Nigerian Broadcast Organization?
Oh, very well we have. If not for Bond, the excesses of the regulator would have been much more than what you have today. Okay. You know, you recall that there was in the early days of NBC, the way stations were fined.
I remember.
Any punity, what was considered to be an offense,
minor stuffs
against the broadcast code.
You
are slammed a fine of 5 million naira. And there were stations that were fined about close to 50 million within a month. And we say it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make. And we said to ourselves, look, test this in the law court. And then there were 2 judgments against the NBC. And that's why you find that today, the NBC is not. When last did you ever hear that the NBC is finding anybody? Because there's a subsisting judgment. You know, that the NBC doesn't have such powers. You know, so these are part of what Bond has encouraged his members to do. To say, look, test the law in the court. You know, the code is not the act. The act establishing the NBC gives you some specific powers, but the code is like a code that guides of our operations.
It's a guide.
So, but the code is not a law. That's what we are saying. That you can't use the code to
harass
people. Neither can you juxtapose or use the code to take the place of the act. The act established the NBC gives certain specific powers. One of them is the issue of a percentage of the income of broadcast stations, which you have also said
should be revenue.
It should be net income. The argument should it be on gross or net? And we said whatever it is, firstly, it shouldn't be more than maybe 1%, even if you must. But these stations are operating at losses.
Of course.
How many stations, even telecommunications, where I was the group MD for close to 15 years, as a publicly quoted company, the accounts are in public domain. And we say, look,
This is it.
This is it. So if a station is operating at a loss, how do you declare surplus? Or how do you
what do you take
2.5%
of a loss
of the loss? So, but the good thing is that under the current DG, there's been room for engagement. There's been room for dialogue. Because in the past, you have had DGs that were very dictatorial, autocratic. So, no, we have said it.
This is it.
Our word is law. But the current DG is a lawyer.
Okay.
And he has seen reason where court rulings must be obeyed. He's been engaging with all the stakeholders, the Broadcasting Organization of Nigeria, Advertising Regulation Council, ANCON, and all the other stakeholders in the broadcast ecosystem have been carried along. And I think that's why you see that there is less tension in the broadcast space, you know.
Yeah,
and I think that's the way it should be.
That's Over the years, Bond also used to do a lot of rights for impoverished broadcasters in Nigeria, because I don't see most Nigerian broadcasters don't buy rights. So there used to be a common purse. Do you still do that? Or that has, you've left it?
No, interestingly, for close to past 10, 15 years, I've been the chairman of the Bond Committee on Sports Rights Acquisition. Okay. But what I've discovered is that, well, you know, these things don't come cheap.
They don't.
I mean, if you want to acquire rights for the Premiership, BSCA is B, and the other stations within the United Kingdom pay
millions of pounds, yes.
Millions of pounds.
Hundreds of millions.
Hundreds of millions of pounds for rights to the English Premiership, you know, and some other properties. But even in the Nigerian
hundreds of millions as well.
If you have to acquire any of those rights, you must be ready to spend over £2 million. Minimum. Minimum, over £2 million.
For one match a week, maybe?
Absolutely. So that made it difficult for us. What we did, well, in the case of the World Cup, in the case of some of the properties, is to engage directly with FIFA and say, look, you can't have us in the same basket with the European nations and whatever. This is Africa. Our economy is not as strong. We can't pay. And then, in fairness, they have actually given us these rights at highly reduced and competitive rates. But it's one thing to have the rights at rates that you think are affordable or that you can afford. It's another thing for you to be able to exploit and make money from the airtime. Because there are some stations that will tell you, look, we'll rather just run our normal programming and you can go with your sports or whatever. You know, the Nations Cup is coming up very soon in December. As we speak, I'm not even aware
what has happened.
What has happened, because a lot of stations have gotten their hands burnt. You know, in 2004 or 2004, I think it was, AIT acquired the rights for the Nations Cup in Cairo, Egypt. We paid about 2.4 million euros. The money we made was not even up to 50% of what was paid.
Costs.
It was not up to 50% of the cost. So ab initio was at a loss. And a lot of stations are going through the same thing. So once you get your fingers burnt, you don't want to touch it again. So that's why you find that under Bond, we said, okay, let's come together and see how we can discuss, negotiate, share the risk, and negotiate the rights for the Nigerian territory. Because Nigeria used to be
lumped with the rest of Africa?
God bless you.
At the point?
No, well, not with the rest of Africa. Sometimes there was a time they were treating Nigeria as a standalone country.
Yeah, they had to remove Nigeria.
Yes, so Nigeria's economy is strong. So Nigeria as a standalone, so you can't do that. At the stage, it's okay. Nigeria, south of the Sahara, you know, they have a way of, you know, aggregating it in terms of geography and whatever.
Well, definitely we'll come back and talk more, especially sports. But it's really a great pleasure catching up with you after many more years in the industry. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great pleasure talking with the legend of the industry, High Chief Tony Akiotu. Do have a pleasant day and enjoy great moments with M4S Television.